Good morning. So I'm going over my storyboarding process today, which is primarily Photoshop and Procreate, mostly Procreate, especially for the storyboard process. For my very first episode, I didn't know how to go about story. I don't know if you can hear my dog in the background. I didn't know how to go about storyboarding it, and what I ended up doing was, so I went two different routes in the first episode, because the first episode was just so long that I started by creating as big of a document as I could and just storyboarding down, but that only allowed so many layers in Procreate, and that eventually I had to create another document. So I ended up having like 5 or 6 Procreate documents, and that got confusing because like then I was flipping back and forth and I didn't have everything all on the same page, and I just was like, I don't know where I am. I didn't know where I was sometimes in the story. And then I made my pages and I was like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? Because at the time I made them like super big because I wanted to be able to convert them to a story layout as well as the vertical layout. And so I made them really large, like 3,000 by an insane number, and I ended up doing the animation tool and flipping, like each panel had its own page and flipping through them. That got even more confusing. So don't do those things. It's honestly better when you're able to have your entire storyboard all on one page so you can really see everything. And I ended up actually watching a tutorial. I'll link that down below. But I watched a tutorial that helped me, and it's creating a canvas. I want to say it's like 7,200 by, I can't remember the dimensions exactly, but you create the canvas, divide it up into anywhere between 8 or 9 panels that are 800 pixels each, and those are your pages. But you can have everything, and I only ever use about 5 pages per episode. So I have all of that information right laid out in front of me. And then I'm able to cut that up, divide it properly, and really go from there. And so if you see like my pink layer, this is like the full storyboard. And it's a really rough layer. It's mostly because it's just me. I know which character is which. Typically I put the speech, I have a script written, so sometimes I just write like little blurbs of what is going to be in what the script is. So I know exactly where I am in the storyline. And then I go over it, and I use models. I use 3D models to help me pose out things. Definitely not ashamed of that. It makes my workflow so much easier, and there's no guessing work. So yeah, I will bust out a 3D model, especially if like the poses are a bit more difficult, or if there's more characters that I need to kind of cement like where they are in relation to each other. I use Magic Poser for that, and that helps out a lot. So I do my rough pinks all on the same page, and then I kind of will go over, pose out things that need to be posed, and go over with my pencils afterwards. And I try to put as much detail in my pencils. I will say I get lazy sometimes during this part, and my impatience comes in, where I'm like, okay, I am overdrawing at this point in time, and that point in time I just need to take like a quick break. But I try to put as much detail in my pencils, because that was the other thing that I was doing in some of my earlier episodes, is I wasn't really detailing out my pencils. So when it came to my line art, I had to do my line art twice, because I would do a line art pass and I'd be like, oh, that's not as detailed as I want it to be, and then I would add more on top of it. So I ended up finding that I made more work for myself by not being as detailed as possible in this particular step. Sometimes in my pink layer, I might put some silly little expressions, like to remind myself, like, oh yes, he's going to be shocked or something like that. But for the most part, it's the pink layer is a really rough, like, this person is standing here, and that doesn't even sometimes translate over to the pencils. What I have, which is where the 3D models come in handy, because I'll have, like, I have my two characters. For instance, Hades and Poseidon are flanking Zeus's throne. And in the one panel, they're looking at each other, and how I have it like, oh, the camera's like looking over Hades' shoulder, and you can see his face and Poseidon's face. But when I threw that in 3D, it was like, that doesn't work. That camera angle doesn't work. You're not going to see this part of the face. You're not going to see this person's body, or they're too far away from each other. So I then change up, okay, well, how that panel is going to look. I'm like, okay, I still want them looking at each other. And sometimes in that case, if they're too far away from each other, that they're going to be small, then I might fix, like break it and make them closer together. But now I'm able to actually, like, have them looking at each other properly, rather than breaking reality completely by having this odd camera angle and a non-existent head pose. So 3D definitely helps out quite a bit when laying out. Definitely not ashamed to use 3D. I think it's a great tool, especially when you're trying to get things out and done as fast as possible. But yeah, try to be as detailed as possible when it comes to doing your pencil. So when it comes to line art, there's no guesswork. It's just like, okay, I'm just inking in my pencils. Don't be like early versions of me, where I was like, oh, my pencils, they're fine. Just gonna do this really weird derpy head, and that's Zeus, and that's fine, and we're gonna move on, because it comes back, and then you're putting in more work than you want to. So for the first episode, I ended up bringing in, because everything was so scattered, I brought everything into a really large Photoshop document, and I laid everything out, which helped out a lot, but I kept having to refer, I was referring to my Photoshop document quite a bit when it came to my process, which is fine. But like I said, it would just be easier to have everything just like right there on one page. So when I break down these pages, I always leave my storyboard page. So I slice up all of the pages as need, like this one is one page, and the other page, and up to 4 to 5 pages. But I always leave my storyboard page, because that way I can always refer to it pretty quickly. And since the entire episode is just laid out very quickly for me, it's easy to see that. And it's easy to see, like, oh, okay, this is Zeus, and he's talking about this at this point in time. And then I can go into my script and find where that is in my script, and able to copy and paste my proper dialogue. I still do my layouts, but now I wait till the ink is done. And so once I finish inking, so after the storyboard, after I ink, I still create my layout format in Photoshop. And this isn't necessarily to help lay out the storyboard anymore. It is actually to help lay out the final episode and how it's going to look. And what I do is I do all of my text, I do all of my editing typically in that area, because if I look at it and I'm like, I still need a panel here, I can easily go back and I can add a panel. Or if, something's missing, I can easily add that, or edit that. So I ended up bringing all of this into a Photoshop document and laying out what the final result will look like with just my lines. That helps out a lot when, after all of the coloring's done, all of the rendering and the effects are done, I then just kind of drop each panel into where their layout is, and all of the text is already done, and it's just like super easy. This might not be, this is the way I've been doing my comic, and this is what has really worked for me with Photoshop and Procreate, and it's definitely worked well for me. I'm not saying this is the ultimate way to do things. You could be like, oh, you should be doing it like this. This is way easier. Please let me know. This is what I just found works for me. And like I said, I know Clip Studio Paint is a really powerful program, especially for comics. I just refuse to buy another program. But yeah, so my storyboard, I lay everything out in pinks really roughly, and then I go over everything with my pencils, using 3D to help me out where I need it, and I go everything over with my pencils, add as much detail as I can, and then I bring everything, after I ink it, I bring everything into Photoshop, lay everything out, see what the final episode is going to potentially look like and read like, edit there, add any more panels that I need in that particular episode, and then go on to color. That is my process for my storyboard and my layout. I mean, let me know if you guys have a better way to do it. Please holler at me. I'm definitely still new to this, so I am taking notes. I think right now I want to start, because of the way I do my storyboards, I think I lay out a bit boringly. I just kind of oh, panel, 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 panel. And they're all kind of the same size. It helped me out a lot in the beginning, but I kind of realized okay, this might be a little boring to read though, having all just kind of very similar panels. So I think, I am going to start really trying to work on more, not only dynamic posing and things like that, because I'm sure my characters read a little stiff sometimes. I've always found that I have stiff line art. But to work on my paneling for vertical scrolling, and that's just something that is just being worked on over time, hoping that it continues, to improve as I improve with this process. But yeah, if anyone has any recommendations or information, please link it down below. I would greatly appreciate that. And that's it for me, guys. This is my, storyboard layout process. I will see you guys. Let me know if there's anything else in the process that a very, very beginner can show you on the what not to do's and the what potentially to do. Yeah, let me know. And if you guys are interested in reading Among Gods, it's up on Webtoons Tapas. So I'll link that down below as well. And have an awesome day.